December, but I got you to keep me warm. If you're broken, I will mend you, and I keep you sheltered from the storm that's raging on. Now I'm out of touch, I'm out of love. I'll pick you up when you're getting down. And out of all these things I've done, I think I love you better now.
Okay, so this is the dining room scene, the opening scene of the narrative. So this was the original layer, a bit unstabilized, but probably you can see the pitch frame there with the green, and it had tracking points on there, but that didn't really come out that well. Also, if you look carefully, you can see Jonathan, who worked as the second cameraman, who was able to pick up the camera from here, because I can't walk across the table. From there, layer was then just stabilized, and then we used key light to track out, or to take out the green and replace it with a grey background. That was then put in and merged with the Lego shots. So these shots here. Again, not very well stabilized because we're working in such a close macro. There, and to do these transitions, I just used a threshold, RGB threshold, which basically distorted all the colors before fading out into the Lego shot. I think then, yep, this composition here. Okay, so we've got another one of those RGB thresholds. Changing it over this real dining room. So the composition. It then changes into this frame layer, which is just from a picture. So that changed into this frame layer, which we then had all the animations for. So this is composition of the animations. I then took those animations and then put them in here to do all these fadings and maskings of the different people, which was then finished in this comp. And then put on the end of here. There you go, you see the final. Another thing I did with this layer is I put a radial blur on it, so it just centers the audience's attention to the frame, and that radial blur moves around. I also time ramped it, so that's how it does the that's how it slows down at that point there, which I thought created a nice effect, which I put in time with the music. For the opening shot of the house, that was just a single layer, video layer, and then just a picture of the Lego house. Picture of the Lego house here, which I just used the RGB threshold again, so you can see how that changes. And there's also a little Easter egg there. I think that's about it. Doesn't really make much sense. But yeah, thank you.
I'll pick you up when you're getting down. And out of all these things I've done.
Okay, so this is the room to car transition. This was the base layer. So the first thing we did, because I forgot to turn the computer screens off, I chucked some masks on there, and then grayed them over. Also, because we filmed this at night time, we had no ambient light from outside, and so to recreate that, I put a softbox up here, as well as a profile with a window gobo, which you can see projecting onto his back there, which hopefully all created the idea of a daytime. So we just put a shelf there, which once you had the aspect ratio bars were easily covered up. The next thing to do was to try and recreate it to look like a curtain. So I had just this layer here with some stroke effects on it. We had fractal noise, ripple and stuff. I believe that was a preset, which added that. Oh, and then I put a ripple effect on, which I had tracking down his hand as he pulled to make him look more like a curtain. And then this curtain layer expands out. Then going back one layer, I then used the CC Mr. Mercury, which I used for the actual movement of the curtain. And then in this final layer, move it on, I had to roto out, or I masked it actually. I had to track the mask of the actor frame by frame as he moved, so that could then be overlaid on here, and I didn't bother to do the top bit of his head because the ratio bars. I also started trying to cover up his logo on his jumper, however I decided it's not really that much of an issue. And then that's just the car layer behind it. Cool, thank you.
And I keep you sheltered from the storm that's raging on now.
Okay, so this is the Lego ambulance shot that I did. This is probably the easiest effect I did. I managed to fit it all in one composition. So I tried to practically do this effect as well. I used an LED baton with a red and blue just sequence that I programmed onto it. And I held that at the actor's face to help try and create some real light onto him. I then took my Lego ambulance and masked it out and put it there, and put it on the layer. I then had to take a mask of this foreground and the actor. However, as the actor didn't move that much, and well, the foreground didn't move at all, that's really easy to do. I then just used, I think, was it the curves? Curves was just doing a bit of brightness. Yeah, this black solid, I had the lens flare coming from up there, going from red to blue. You see it's just changing there over the keyframes, which changed from red to blue. I also added a little bit of vignette and rain, which I think is just one of the, just CC rainfall auto-generated. I then added a wiggle armor effect onto it because I had the shot on a tripod, because I was holding the LED baton just here. Just created more of a handheld shot, which looked more natural compared to all the others that came before it. I then went on to color grade this in Premiere Pro. As you see, it was a bit bright. So yeah, that was this Lego ambulance.
things go wrong, we can knock it down. My 3 words have 2 meanings, but there's one thing on my mind. It's all for you. And it's dark in a cold December, but I got you to keep me warm.
Okay, so this is the first transition, which is from the performance to the narrative, where the text in the sky appears and the camera then pans down into the narrative house. This was the first effect that I did for the project, so it was basically a bit simpler. To do it from this video, the camera pans up to the sky. I then just use a simple track, just using a couple of points of the branch within After Effects, which I could then apply the text to. For the text, I just took some number layers and used the auto trace function in After Effects to apply those masks to a white solid, which then meant I was able to change from one number to another, and I believe that's just a stroke effect going on at the start there. Goes from 3 to 1, and then it goes to an L for the It's All For You, or is it an E? I can't remember. I also had this text layer behind the branch. So to do that, I deliberately overexposed the shot when filming, which isn't good practice, but it basically just meant I could just apply a linear color key just on white. On white, just so I can get rid of that. That all came together. I also added a wiggle armor effect to carry on the handheld look on the text layers. And then once that had all finished, it changed from the sky and the forest to the house sky, and the shot pans down, which then cuts into the glitch effect between the Lego and Real House, which I merged those 2 projects within Premiere Pro.
I'm gonna paint you by numbers and color you in. If things go right, we can frame it and put you on a wall.
Okay, so I'm now going to try and explain the paint you by numbers sequence. So this was the original base layer that I shot. I just had the actor against a white background, which I believe was just a blanket actually. And yep, so that was that. You can also see my phone there playing the music. I then took that and I rotoscoped him out and the frame separately against a black background. Well, rotoscoped him out, so it's a black background, and I could re-import a white solid behind him. I then took that effect and I then took that composition and I added, I think there's 5 different effects. I was able to turn him from that all the way through to how he was there. So post-rise, hue and saturation, curve, smart blur and cartoon, and they're all coming out at different points. I then took that layer and needed to apply it to the wall. For the wall, I used a shatter effect, which I then reversed here using time ramp to switch those keyframes around, so the wall rebuilt itself, and then just took the layer of the actor and the frame and just need to put it against the wall with the white, with the forest background there, and you can see I've got the wall with the frame and tracking points so I get an idea of scale. And then that shot ends by panning left like that. So I then needed to track the wall to pan left also. One thing that I wasn't happy about was the frame didn't exactly track onto the wall properly, neither did it when it panned to the left. However, my computer started overheating when I'm trying to run several comps within comps with lots of effects on it. Yeah, which also meant the rendering time for the sequence was a couple of hours. Yeah, and a couple of gig just for like this 10 seconds. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you.
And it's more than I can take. And it's dark in the cold December.
Okay, so this is the final effect I'm going to try and explain. This is the car crash sequence. I shot this really easily. I just did 4 layers. I did a blank plate. I then had the actor in the foreground, the actor in the background, and the car all as separate layers. And all I needed to do was just mask out each section and just layer them on top of each other. And then there's a bit of keyframing when it came to the actor being hit. So I think it's pretty much a pretty hard mask all the way along here for this foreground actor. I then went through and masked the nose of the car because I didn't really need to do this side. I could just use that. And in fact, if you look carefully, I can see I didn't really feather that well, but from a distance you can't really tell, which is good. I then just took the actor being hit. I used the puppet tool to manipulate his limbs, and it was just a lot of keyframing as well. Bit of time ramping as well, and I think all that worked. Then in Premiere, I took some black solids and just flashed them up for a couple of frames for a strobe look. And I also, if you pause the video quickly in this sequence, you can see I put a Lego figure over the top of the actor to also link back to the Lego theme. Oh, and I also just added a bit of motion blur onto his layer, just so it looked a bit more realistic, as if he was actually being hit and not just done as an effect. So yeah, thank you.